Hi, I'm Sam Rockwell.
And I'm Keira Knightley.
Describe yourself at age 16.
I think I was pretty neurotic.
Has that changed?
No, not that much.
Finding something you weren't expecting so close to home is a unique surprise. The fact that it's a good thing also makes it worth it. Laggies, starring Keira Knightley, Sam Rockwell, and Chloë Moretz, did more for me than most other films that dwarf its budget and scope. For movies that take place predominantly in Seattle, I can't think of much better. When it comes to film settings, Seattle doesn't often get the first pick. You'll find that films that do shoot in the Seattle area aren't remembered for their quality. Most are average, a few are downright gutter material. Those likely crossed your radar at some point, so I'll save you the hassle. Consider these spared for now. Kind of a shame that such a bustling place often gets brushed aside while we get endless New York and LA settings. For the ones that take place here, many actually don't. You may get sweeping or establishing shots, or even a shot over a couple of days type scenario. These are the ones that are predominantly filmed elsewhere, and thus feel elsewhere. Laggies is not that case. Being born here in Bellevue, part of the Seattle metropolitan area, I had a certain conditioning, as all of us did growing up in our respective regions. This socialization is something learned, and typically your family, friends, and location play the biggest influences. It's natural that while we're children, we only have specific things actually expected of us, a roadmap to follow with a clear direction to go. The idea is that once you've attained a certain level of competency to provide for yourself, such as a degree and a job, you transcend your youth and become a self-sustaining eligible adult. From then on, everything comes together. In a nutshell, you grew up. Except, what if that doesn't happen? What then? What if you aren't growing up, or what if that's not what you want? In today's world with endless opportunities, this issue rings truer than any other era in history. This is the central question of director Lynn Shelton and author Andrea Siegel's film. Siegel's previous novels dealt with the internal struggles of young characters and the identity they've made for themselves. That remains largely unchanged this time around, albeit stretching it with the story. Despite the setbacks, this time around she and Shelton channeled their energy into one of the most personal and charming little films I've ever seen. The core of Laggies' charm first falls on Shelton. She is the one that needed to do this. She's not only raised in Seattle, but has a command over a production that a movie like this called for.
As a collaborator is really fantastic because she has such a specific skill set, one that comes from time spent as an actress and time spent as an editor. You really see a filmmaker that has a foot in the emotional content of a story and another foot in the sort of nuts and bolts of the storytelling. It's really about naturalism and truth and performance.
I've read many scripts, and I just had never really found a script that felt like, oh my God, I have to do this. But to have a script that felt totally like something I needed to direct was really exciting.
She can be credited with taking the original story location from Orange County, California to the Pacific Northwest. Her warm attitude and casual approach made the right match for fashioning the distinct West Coast feel to a generation struggling with the traditional approaches to life in the booming internet age. I haven't seen Shelton's past work, so I can't go all in on comparing similarities in style. Now, despite Shelton's relaxed demeanor, she went out of her way to keep this movie grounded, more so than I would expect a director of her level to do. What we got here was a month-long shoot for a state-assisted $5 million budget. Props to location manager Dave Drummond for keeping tabs on what it took to make this movie feel distinctively King County. Shelton detailed that it took extra effort to just stick to crew that they had in the area rather than go for more competitive programs that would have offered bigger perks at the expense of travel and relocating. That goes the same for keeping evenness and flavor. As she states, I don't think anybody but the most local people who live in the area picks up on the fact that about half of the film takes place on the east side and half takes place on the west side in Seattle. It was during this sequence early on that I picked up immediately that this was a local film. Laggies has the benefit of the right stable of actors making this movie come alive. While Anne Hathaway was supposed to be in the lead role, and as much as I would have liked to have seen that, Knightley found her way in instead. All things considered, I think the film ended up even better for it.
I think it's a film about somebody having a quarter-life crisis and finding herself suddenly floating and not knowing where she wants to go, what she wants to do, who she should be doing it with, where she should be doing it, or anything, and suddenly everything sort of collapses and she starts questioning absolutely everything that she is and where she is and who she's with. And she sort of befriends this 16-year-old and kind of takes a holiday for a week, really, hanging out with this family and sort of reverting back to being 16. I don't know. I mean, I instantly liked the script and I instantly thought, this is interesting because I totally relate to this character. And yet I'm an actress who totally loves what she does. I'm from England. I'm totally different in most ways to the character in this film. And yet I can completely identify with her. I feel like I either am her or I know versions of her, or, I think everybody comes to points all through their lives where they question who they are, what they want to be, if they're doing the right thing. And I think that goes without saying, whether you love your job, whether you love your partner, whatever. I think that's what we do, And so I think it's impossible not to identify with her and love her for her flaws.
She adopted a generic West Coast accent which surprisingly worked well. I'd never heard her attempt it before, but I've got no complaints in her speech, consistency, or dialect. I'm not going to be picky about the accent itself, since the vast majority of us up here aren't even aware of it. I remember seeing her first in theaters watching The Phantom Menace of all things, not knowing at the time how much she'd accomplish, or how we were 5 years and a day apart in age. Years later, she hit mainstream fame with Pirates, cementing her lead actress status ever since. If you're a Knightley fan, you might have a favorite performance by her. Pirates, Imitation Game, Colette, Love Actually. As much as I'd say one of her more well-known roles, watching her here resonated with me in a way that none of the other roles could ever match. Playing an Eastsider, which was confirmed to be Bellevue by Shelton, Knightley as Megan starts off better than others lagging behind their peers. Certainly better than I would be by comparison. She's highly educated, well off, and lives with her boyfriend. Despite all that success going for her on the surface, her picturesque life is fruitless. She doesn't want to get married, is downgraded to jobs far beneath her education level, or straight up unemployed, and she doesn't fit in anymore with her once close-knit group of friends. To me, that sounds like the perfect girlfriend, but to her it means her life is one big dead end. With no career in sight and an upcoming marriage she doesn't feel ready for, she attempts to extend taking accountability under the guise of attending personal development seminars. What ends up happening is she finds comfort in a high school girl, Annika, choosing to hide out with her instead in order to escape her responsibilities and stall owning up to her own impasse in life. She effectively regresses rather than face her problems. While her form of escapism would nail me with a pedo card if I tried it, Megan's life after school situation plagues many post-university graduates, strong economy or not. The idea that life will flourish into its own after you make it to the finish line with degree in hand and a well-paying job waiting for you never pans out for some. Normalcy is not a single measurement, but vast in complexity and with various levels of fulfillment. Megan and her friends all grew up together, but people change as that growing up happens. They undergo push and pulls of society and personal hardship with or without others, seeking their own aspirations and emotional satisfaction. Megan clings to Annika's life knowing that she hasn't had to face this reality yet. Annika in turn needs Megan as an older figure she can trust, something she's unable to do with her father. Their relationship goes from using each other for harmless cons to confiding in one another. Annika is stuck on her life's path, while Megan is stuck trying to get out of her own. Someone who has gone through the rigors of life is Annika's laid-back attorney father, Craig. Divorced and worn out, but genial and forthcoming, Craig picks up on Megan's situation, or as much as she'd reveal, and allows her to work out her issues under his roof. He gets that this is weird, as we already have, and that there are better ways that this could have been resolved. Whatever that could have been may have made more sense, but it would have neglected using these actors in a scenario peculiar enough like this, because that's where this movie shines. In the deft performances and chemistry of these three leads between each other and the world they inhabit. All three slipped into the rated R roles so naturally it came across as specifically written with them in mind. The foundation of characters fitting in that narrative to invest in make it conceivable enough by the time the right beats are hit to make a difference. These characters feel like part of this city, for all that they have or haven't accomplished. Growing up to live life happily, succeeding in life to attain normalcy, finding out who a person is when not confined by their title or status, and desires that are sacrificed in order to attain those goals. I often find these ups and downs missing in films like this. Films that forget these little details to make us care about how the people we're watching aren't merely avatars to drive a plot. Megan and her school friends were best mates. Those same mates became people she couldn't relate to anymore. She sees the fault in herself, not being able to adapt to them or fear losing what she cherished the most. She saw the fear in having a job where she had to help broken people before she fixed herself. It's her understanding that her identity does not belong to others to own. Finding a solution is the struggle a person undergoes to find that identity that they call their own. For all of Megan's scheming, shirking, and digging herself deeper and deeper into trouble, she comes across as real enough to be relatable. Seeing her search for that soul she's lost comes across as nuanced and genuine. This is not a film about positive role models or everything working out. It's about changing times, people conditioned to expect that everything will be alright even if it won't, and that there needs to be something that keeps us going. So where does this all lead? What answer is there for those that aren't able to find solace in conventional adulthood? Shelton and Siegel respond to this in a few ways, which may be unsatisfactory to those expecting a complete winning solution. I wish I can sum it up as whatever makes you happy, but that's not an answer, that's an embellishment. It's something that may constitute the ending to this movie, considering the choice that Megan ends up making, but there's more to it than just what makes her happy. All told, Laggies works far more than it doesn't. There are those that would be turned off by young angst and mellow comedy, as plenty of films fail and come across as cringy or unfunny. I went in thinking this would be vapid but passively humorous, and instead left me feeling like this movie was made for me. Since the 90s and 2000s when I was a kid, I've become more insular and reclusive. By high school, I knew I was going to join the military and go to college, both of which I did and have since completed. I started believing my own direction was the right one, through success and failure. Lagging behind was something I was always scared of. It may hurt to try new things, and it will affect those close to you. I know after years of languishing that not everything ends the way you hoped. I just didn't give up finding what I hoped would work.
I'm sure it does seem kind of stupid to make some sort of rigid plan for the future, but it's stupider not to start paying attention to who you are and what makes you happy. Otherwise, you just float.
It's not my position to give advice, I'm just here to talk about films. This is one of those I think many would connect with. I happen to see it at exactly this point in my life, so I wonder how my opinion would change had I seen it while I was still in university or I saw it many years later. I'm just glad when I should have seen it, and when I needed to see it was at the same time. The good thing about youth is that there's a long way to go before you truly don't get another chance.